The door creaked open, revealing a shadow so still it could have been a ghost. But the faint scent of whiskey and old money told another story. This was no ghost. It was Harlan Blackwood, the forgotten patriarch of Texas's most powerful dynasty, standing alone in a mansion that hadn't heard laughter in decades. His trembling hand clutched a framed photo, the glass cracked right down the middle, splitting the faces of his wife and children like a bad omen. Tonight, like every night, they'd gathered downstairs for their lavish dinner. Without him, the clinking of crystal glasses and forced laughter drifted up the staircase, a cruel reminder. He was the man who built this empire, yet they'd buried him alive in his own home. But then, a knock at the door, not the grand entrance where politicians and billionaires begged for favors, but the side door, the one used by servants. Harlan froze. No one came knocking for him anymore. The butler hadn't even bothered to answer it. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He walked toward it himself, each step heavier than the last, his polished boots echoing through the hollow halls like a death march. When he pulled the door open, the storm outside nearly knocked it from his grip. And there she stood, a woman soaked to the bone, her arms clutching a child so frail it looked like a gust of wind could carry him away. Her eyes locked onto Harlan's, and in that single desperate glance he saw something he hadn't in decades. The truth. "Mr. Blackwood," she rasped, her voice raw from shouting against the storm. "I know you don't owe me anything, but my son has the same disease your wife died from, and I think you're the only one who can save him." Harlan's breath caught. The photo in his hand suddenly felt like a brand. His wife's smile, frozen in time, seemed to whisper from the glass, "Remember what they took from us." The child coughed, a sound so small it barely cut through the roar of the wind. But it was enough. Because in that moment, Harlan Blackwood, the man Texas forgot, realized he'd just been handed a choice. Let the past keep killing him, or finally fight back. What happens next will leave you breathless. Will Harlan risk everything to expose the lies his family buried? Or will the Blackwood name claim another victim tonight? If you want the answer, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over. The storm raged like a living thing, its howling winds clawing at the peeling paint of the mansion's side door as Harlan Blackwood stood frozen, the woman's words echoing in his skull. "Your wife's disease." The words were a blade twisting in a wound he'd spent a decade trying to stitch shut. His wife, Eleanor, her laughter still haunted these halls. Her perfume lingered in the curtains, her absence carved into every corner of this godforsaken house. And now, here was this stranger, this mother, her eyes wild with the kind of fear he hadn't seen since the night Eleanor's breath slowed to nothing in his arms. The child in her arms coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that dragged Harlan back to the sterile white walls of the hospital, to the beeping machines that eventually went silent. His hands shook. He hadn't felt this alive, or this terrified, in years. The woman stepped forward, her boots leaving muddy prints on the marble floor the housekeepers polished daily. She didn't care. Neither did Harlan. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "They told me you'd never see me. That you didn't care about anything anymore. But I had to try. My son's name is Jamie. He's 7 and he's running out of time." She shifted the boy in her arms, and Harlan finally saw his face. Pale, sunken cheeks, dark circles under his eyes. But his gaze was sharp, aware, like he understood more than a child should. Like he knew this was his last chance. Harlan's chest tightened. Eleanor had looked at him the same way in her final days, her fingers gripping his sleeve, her voice a whisper. "Promise me you'll keep fighting, even when I'm gone." He hadn't. He'd let them win. He'd let them erase her. But now, here was this boy. This fighting boy. Harlan's throat burned. He stepped back, gesturing them inside before he could stop himself. The warmth of the house hit them like a slap. The scent of aged leather and bourbon, the hum of the chandelier swaying slightly from the storm. The woman, Lena, she'd said her name was, hesitated in the foyer, her eyes darting to the grand staircase, the portraits of Blackwoods long dead, their judgments silent but heavy. "You live here alone?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. It was the kind of thing people said when they couldn't fathom how someone could be so rich and so empty at the same time. Harlan didn't answer. Instead, he led them to the study, the one room he'd refused to let the family redecorate after Eleanor died. Her favorite chair still sat by the fireplace, the fabric worn where her fingers had traced the armrests. Lena's breath hitched when she saw it, like she could feel the ghost too. She lowered Jamie onto the sofa, tucking a blanket around him. One of Eleanor's, Harlan realized with a jolt. The boy's fingers curled into the fabric, knuckles white. "He's been like this for weeks," Lena said, her voice raw. "The doctors say it's the same thing, the same rare thing. They say there's no cure. But I found your wife's old research files in the library archives. She was close, wasn't she? She was so close." Harlan's knees nearly gave out. He turned away, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass, then a third. The amber liquid burned going down, but it didn't dull the memories. Eleanor in her lab coat, her hair escaping its clip, her eyes alight with that fire he'd loved since they were teenagers. "I've almost got it, Harlan," she'd told him the night before the accident. "Just a little more time." But time was the one thing the Blackwoods didn't give. His father had pulled the funding, called her work a waste of resources. And then the car crash, convenient, wasn't it? That took her off the road and into a ravine no one found for hours. The police called it an accident. Harlan called it murder. He turned back to Lena, who was watching him with a mix of hope and dread. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice rough. She didn't flinch. "The truth. And your help." The files mentioned a breakthrough, a compound she synthesized, but the notes were incomplete. "I think your family made sure of that." Her chin trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. "I think they didn't want her to succeed, and I think you know why." The room spun. Harlan gripped the desk, the wood groaning under his fingers. No one had ever dared say it out loud. Not the lawyers, not the doctors, not even the private investigator he'd hired and then fired when the man started asking too many questions. But this woman, this stranger, had walked into his house and laid it bare. "You don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice barely above a growl. "I know exactly what I'm asking," Lena shot back, her own anger flaring. "I'm asking you to stop letting them win. I'm asking you to help me save my son the way you couldn't save your wife. And I'm asking you to remember what it feels like to fight." Jamie coughed again, a sound that seemed to rattle his entire body. Lena dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her palm to his forehead. "He's burning up," she whispered. "Please, Mr. Blackwood, if there's even a chance." Harlan looked at the boy. Really looked. And for the first time in a decade, he saw something other than his own reflection in the hollow eyes of the past. He saw a child who wasn't supposed to die, a child who could be saved, a child who, unlike Eleanor, still had time. His jaw clenched. He strode to the bookshelf and pressed a hidden latch. The panel swung open, revealing a safe. Lena's breath hitched as he spun the dial, the numbers clicking into place like a countdown. Inside were stacks of documents, a flash drive, and a single vial of clear liquid, labeled in Eleanor's handwriting. Trial 47B. Final iteration. His fingers trembled as he pulled it out. "She hid this," he said, his voice hoarse. "She knew they'd come for it." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Does it work?" Harlan didn't answer. Instead, he knelt beside Jamie, his massive frame dwarfing the boy's fragile one. "Son," he said, his voice gruff but gentle, "how do you feel about breaking a few rules?" Jamie's lips curled, just slightly. "Depends," he rasped. "Are we going to make the bad guys mad?" Something in Harlan's chest cracked open. He looked at Lena, and for the first time in years he didn't see a stranger. He saw a mirror, a fighter, a mother who, like him, had nothing left to lose. "Oh," he said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "We're going to do a lot more than that." Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the fire in the hearth roared to life, casting long shadows on the walls. Shadows of a man who'd spent too long in the dark, and a woman who'd just handed him a match. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. The Blackwood Empire had no idea what was coming, and neither did they. The study door clicked shut behind them, sealing the three of them in a bubble of flickering firelight and the scent of old books and desperation. Harlan's hands shook as he uncapped the vial, the liquid inside catching the light like a promise, or a poison. He hadn't let himself hope in years. Hope was a luxury for men who hadn't buried their hearts in the Texas dirt. But Jamie's eyes, wide and fever-bright, were locked onto the vial like it was salvation itself, and Harlan realized something terrifying. He wanted this to work, more than he wanted his next breath. Lena's fingers dug into the sofa cushion, her knuckles white. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered, but Harlan heard the real question beneath it. What if we're too late? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Jamie, who was watching him with an eerie calm, like a soldier before battle. "Kid," Harlan said, his voice rough, "this might sting, or it might not do a damn thing, but your mama here, she didn't give up on you, and I'm not either." Jamie nodded, his small hand finding Lena's. "Then do it," he said, and the trust in his voice was a knife to Harlan's ribs. The first drop hit Jamie's tongue like a secret. His body tensed, his breath hitching, but then nothing. Silence. Harlan's pulse roared in his ears. Too late. Too late. It was always too. Jamie's fingers twitched. His chest rose deeper this time. Then another breath and another. Color bloomed in his cheeks like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, and Lena made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Oh my God." Jamie's eyes, bright now, alive, met Harlan's, and the old man's vision blurred. For the first time in a decade, he let himself believe in something bigger than his own grief. But then the door burst open. Harlan spun, shielding Jamie and Lena instinctively, his body a barrier between them and the intruder. His brother, Richard, stood there, his tailored suit immaculate, his smile as sharp as the knife in his hand. "Well, well," Richard drawled, stepping inside like he owned the place, like he did own the place. "I heard rumors you'd finally lost your mind, Harlan. But this? Hiding contraband drugs and harboring strangers?" His gaze flicked to Jamie, then to the vial in Harlan's hand, and his expression darkened. "That's my property, brother." Lena's breath hitched. "Your property?" she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "That's a cure for children." Richard's laugh was a dry, humorless thing. A cure that never should have existed. Eleanor's little pet project was a liability. Father knew it. I know it. And deep down, his eyes locked onto Harlan's. "So do you." The words were a gut punch. Harlan's mind flashed back to the boardroom, years ago, his father's cold voice cutting through the silence. "We don't fund fairy tales, Harlan. We fund winners." Eleanor's face, pale with fury, the way she'd stormed out, tires screeching the last time he ever saw her alive. Harlan's hands clenched. "You son of a bitch," he growled. Richard's smile didn't waver. "Call me what you want. But that vial," he nodded to the two men flanking him. Blackwood security, their faces blank, their loyalty bought. "Hand it over, or the boy goes back to the hospital, permanently." Jamie's grip on Lena's hand tightened. Harlan saw the fear in the kid's eyes, but also something else. Defiance. The same fire Eleanor had. The same fire he used to have. His jaw set. "You touch him," he said, his voice low and lethal. "And I swear to God, Richard, I'll burn this whole dynasty to the ground." Richard's smirk faltered. For the first time, he looked uncertain, but only for a second, then he snapped his fingers. The security guards lunged. What happened next moved faster than thought. Lena screamed. Jamie ducked. Harlan moved, not like the broken old man he'd been for years, but like the man who'd once built an empire with his bare hands. His shoulder slammed into the first guard, sending him crashing into the bookshelf. Eleanor's old medical texts rained down like judgment. The second guard grabbed for Harlan's arm, but Jamie, little sick Jamie, lunged forward and bit his wrist hard. The man howled, stumbling back, and Harlan seized the moment. He snatched the fireplace poker and swung. The clang of metal on bone echoed through the room. Richard's face twisted in fury. "You'll regret that," he snarled, pressing a button on his phone. Distantly, sirens wailed. Police are on their way. Assault, kidnapping, drug trafficking. His grin was a blade. "You'll rot in a cell, Harlan. And that boy? He'll die in foster care." Harlan's breath came fast, but his mind was clear. He turned to Lena, who was clutching Jamie to her chest, her face streaked with tears. "The basement," he said, pressing a key into her hand. "Third door on the left. There's a tunnel. It leads to the old carriage house. Take it. Go." "What about you?" she whispered. He looked at Richard, then back at her. "I'm done running." The sirens grew louder. Lena hesitated for half a second. Then she grabbed Jamie and ran. Harlan turned to face his brother, the fireplace poker still gripped in his hand, his knuckles bleeding. Richard's smile was triumphant. "You always were a sentimental fool," he said. "Just like Eleanor." Harlan didn't flinch. "No," he said, his voice steady. "I'm just the one who finally remembered what she fought for." And then he swung. Glass shattered. Blood hit the floor. And outside, the storm raged on, unaware that the real tempest was just beginning. What would you do if your family's legacy was built on a lie? Comment below, would you fight or would you run? The basement door slammed shut behind Lena, plunging her and Jamie into near-total darkness. The only light came from the flickering bulb above the third door on the left, its weak glow casting long, trembling shadows on the damp stone walls. Jamie's breath came in short, sharp gasps, his small body still shaking from the adrenaline. Or the remnants of the disease, Lena wasn't sure which. She pressed her ear against the door, her heart hammering so loud she could barely hear the muffled chaos upstairs. Harlan's roar, the crash of furniture. Richard's cold, commanding voice cutting through it all like a blade. "You're finished, Harlan. This ends tonight." Lena's fingers fumbled with the key Harlan had given her. The lock clicked, and the door groaned open, revealing a narrow tunnel lined with cobwebs and the stale scent of earth. The air was thicker here, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jamie squeezed her hand. "Mom," he whispered, his voice raw but stronger than it had been hours ago. "What if he's wrong? What if there's nothing down there?" She cupped his face, her thumbs brushing away the dirt smudged on his cheeks. "Then we make our own way out," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But Harlan didn't lie to us, Jamie. He remembered us, and that means something." Jamie nodded, his small jaw set with a determination that made her chest ache. They stepped into the tunnel, the door shutting behind them with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. The tunnel sloped downward, the floor uneven beneath their feet. Lena's phone flashlight flickered to life, its beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The walls were lined with old pipes, their metal surfaces rusted and weeping condensation. Jamie's fingers trailed along them, his brow furrowed. "Mom," he said suddenly. "Look." His light had caught something. A symbol carved into the stone. A phoenix, its wings spread wide, its beak open as if mid-scream. Lena's breath hitched. She'd seen that symbol before, in Eleanor Blackwood's old research notes. She marked the way, Lena realized, her pulse quickening. Eleanor knew someone might need this. She knew her family would try to bury the truth. Jamie's eyes widened. "Like a treasure map," he breathed. "Like a lifeline," Lena corrected, urging him forward. They moved faster now, the tunnel twisting and turning like a labyrinth. The air grew colder, the silence deeper, broken only by their ragged breaths and the distant drip-drip of water. Then, abruptly, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. Lena's light swept across the space, illuminating shelves lined with dusty jars, a cot in the corner, and, there, a rusted metal door, its surface marked with the same phoenix. Jamie let out a shaky laugh. "We did it," he said, but Lena's stomach twisted. The door was sealed with a heavy chain and a padlock, its metal gleaming too new, too deliberate. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Her fingers flew to the lock, tugging uselessly. Harlan said this would lead us out. He promised. Jamie pressed his ear to the door. "Mom," he said, his voice suddenly urgent. "I hear something." Lena froze. Then she heard it too. Voices, muffled, but close. "Check the tunnel. If they're not there, they're already in the carriage house, and if they are..." A cold chuckle. "Well, let's just say the Blackwoods don't leave loose ends." Lena's blood turned to ice. Richard's men, they'd been followed. Or worse, betrayed. She grabbed Jamie's shoulders, her mind racing. "We have to hide now." She pulled him toward the cot, yanking the thin mattress aside to reveal a hollow space beneath. "Get in. Don't move. Don't breathe." Jamie didn't argue. He scrambled into the hiding spot just as the chamber door groaned open. Lena threw the mattress back, her body shielding the cot as two men stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the dark like searchlights. One of them, tall, his face scarred, kicked a jar off the shelf, sending it shattering to the floor. "Empty," he grunted. "They're not here." The other man, younger, his eyes sharp, crouched by the sealed door. "Then where the hell did they go?" His fingers traced the phoenix symbol and Lena's stomach dropped. "Wait, this isn't just a way out. It's a trap." The scarred man smirked. "Smart girl, Lena, but not smart enough." He turned, his flashlight beam sweeping the room and stopping on the cot. On her, Lena's breath caught. The man's smile widened, slow and predatory. "Well, well," he said, stepping closer. "Looks like we found ourselves a rat." Jamie's fingers dug into Lena's leg, his body trembling. She didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe, her mind screaming for a way out. A weapon, anything. And then the ground shuddered. A deafening boom echoed through the tunnel, the force of it sending dust raining from the ceiling. The men stumbled, their flashlights swinging wildly. "What the hell?" The younger one barely got the words out before another explosion rocked the chamber, this one closer. The sealed door buckled, its chain snapping like a gunshot. Light spilled in from the other side, firelight, and through the smoke and debris a figure emerged, silhouetted against the flames. Harlan. His suit was torn, his face streaked with blood and soot, his eyes wild with a fury Lena had never seen before. He stepped over the threshold, a fire extinguisher in one hand, a jagged piece of metal in the other. The scarred man lunged, but Harlan moved faster. The metal flashed, and the man crumpled with a choked cry. The younger one backed away, hands raised. "Boss, wait!" Harlan didn't wait. He swung the extinguisher like a bat, the crunch of impact echoing off the walls. The man dropped. Silence. Lena's hands flew to her mouth. Jamie let out a shaky breath. Harlan turned to them, his chest heaving, his voice raw. "You good?" Lena nodded, unable to speak. Harlan's gaze flicked to the cot, then back to her. "Smart kid," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Then his expression darkened. "They're not done. Richard's got the cops, the press, half the damn city in his pocket. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this place is crawling with them." Jamie scrambled out of the hiding spot, his face set. "Then what do we do?" Harlan looked at Lena, then at the tunnel behind them, the one that led back to the mansion, back to the life he'd spent years drowning in. Then he looked at the door Harlan had just broken through, the firelight beyond it casting long, dancing shadows. "We burn it all down," he said, his voice steady. "Every last secret, every last lie." He held out his hand. "You in?" Lena looked at her son, at the man who'd given them a chance when no one else would. At the fire spreading through the tunnel like justice. She took Harlan's hand. The three of them stepped into the light. Behind them, the Blackwood mansion burned. Ahead of them, the night stretched out, endless and unknown. And somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. The carriage house doors burst open, and the night air hit them like a living thing, cold, sharp, alive with the scent of rain and smoke. The mansion behind them was a pyre, flames licking at the windows, the heat so intense it warmed their backs even as they ran. Harlan didn't look back. He'd spent a lifetime watching that house swallow everything he loved. Tonight, he was the one walking away. Lena's hand was iron in his. Jamie's small fingers clutching his sleeve like a lifeline. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The sirens were closer now, the wail of them cutting through the storm. But Harlan knew these roads better than the cops ever would. He led them through the back paths of the estate, the ones the gardeners used, the ones his father had forbidden him from taking as a child. A Blackwood doesn't sneak, the old man had sneered. But tonight, Harlan wasn't a Blackwood. He was a man, and men who had nothing left to lose didn't follow rules. They reached the old gatehouse at the edge of the property, its rusted lock giving way with a single twist. Beyond it, the road stretched out, slick with rain, empty. Harlan turned to Lena, her face streaked with soot and tears, her eyes bright with something he hadn't seen in himself in years. Hope. Jamie stood between them, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths, his color returned, his gaze sharp. The disease that had been eating him alive was gone. Eleanor's cure had worked. Harlan's throat tightened. He reached into his pocket and pressed a set of keys into Lena's palm. "There's a cabin 2 hours north," he said, his voice rough. "No one knows about it. Not even Richard. It's yours now." Lena's fingers closed around the keys, her eyes searching his. "What about you?" He looked back at the mansion, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "I've got one last thing to do." Lena's breath hitched. "Harlan." "Go," he said, cutting her off. "Take Jamie and live. That's the only thing that matters now." He knelt in front of the boy, his massive frame eye level with Jamie's small one. "You're a fighter, kid, like your mom, like Eleanor." Jamie's chin trembled, but he nodded, his grip tightening on his mother's hand. "We'll tell them what you did," he said, his voice fierce. "We'll tell them the truth." Harlan's smile was sad, but real. Some truths don't need words. He stood, turning toward the burning mansion one last time. The fire had reached the second floor now, the heat so intense it made the air shimmer. Somewhere in that inferno were the files, the lies, the proof, everything his family had buried to keep their power intact. And Harlan was going to make sure it all burned. Lena grabbed his arm, her voice desperate. "Come with us, you don't have to do this alone." Harlan looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, he let himself feel the weight of what he was about to lose. The chance to watch Jamie grow, the chance to see Lena rebuild her life, the chance to be part of something good. But then he thought of Eleanor, her smile, her fire, the way she'd fought until her last breath for something bigger than herself. He thought of every child who'd never get the cure because the Blackwoods had decided their lives weren't worth the cost. And he knew. "Some debts aren't paid with time," he said softly. "They're paid with fire." Lena's tears fell freely now, but she didn't argue again. She understood. Some battles weren't meant to be won. They were meant to be fought. She pulled Jamie close, whispering something in his ear, and the boy nodded, his small hand reaching out to squeeze Harlan's one last time. "Thank you," he said, simple and sincere. Harlan's chest ached. He watched as Lena and Jamie turned, their figures growing smaller as they disappeared into the night. Then he turned back to the mansion, the heat of the flames licking at his skin, the smoke filling his lungs. He walked toward it, not running, not hesitating, just walking, like a man who'd finally found his way home. The explosion tore through the night like a scream. Flames shot into the sky, a beacon of light so bright it could have been seen for miles. The shockwave knocked Harlan off his feet, the force of it stealing his breath. But he didn't fight it. He let the heat wash over him, let the smoke fill his vision, let the past burn. Somewhere in the distance he could hear the sirens, the shouts, the chaos of a dynasty crumbling. But all he felt was peace. Because for the first time in a decade, Harlan Blackwood wasn't afraid. He wasn't alone, and he wasn't a victim. The fire roared around him, a funeral pyre for the man he'd been and the secrets he'd kept. And as the mansion collapsed in on itself, Harlan closed his eyes and let the night take him, knowing that somewhere out there, a mother and her son were driving toward the sunrise. What would you sacrifice to burn down the lies holding you back? Comment below. Because some stories aren't just about survival. They're about setting the world on fire,